The year was 1850. This land, this vast and broken heart of the West, did not yet know its name. Men called it Texas, or they called it Comanche. But the land itself answered to no one. It spoke in a single, constant language, a fine, pale dust that coated the tongue, a heat that pressed down like a physical weight, and a wind that blew from one end of eternity to the other. The grass grew tall, an ocean of pale green and yellow, but it was a cruel ocean. Hiding rattlesnakes and scalding earth, life here was pared down to the bone. It was a place that demanded everything a man or woman had, and often it was not enough. The rules were simple. Be strong, or die. Be watchful, or die. It was a time of brutal, shifting conflict. There was no grand war, not yet. Instead, there were 1,000 small, vicious fires a ranch burned, a hunting party ambushed, a treaty signed in bad faith and broken before the ink was dry. The United States was a young, hungry animal, pushing its borders west, and the people who had lived on this land for 1,000 seasons were pushing back. Conti lived in the center of this fire. He was a young man, perhaps 20 summers gone, but his eyes held the stillness of someone much older. He sat his horse on a low, sun-baked rise, watching the horizon. He was Comanche, the long line of his back, the way his hands rested on the pony's mane, the blackness of his hair. It was all of the people. But his mind, his memories, they were fractured. He saw two worlds. He was Conti, the rising hawk. He was also, for 6 years, Kent Parker. He remembered the smell of the Parker kitchen, a small sod house near the Brazos. He remembered Sarah Parker, a woman with pale, thin hands that were always covered in flour. She would scrub his face with lye soap until his skin felt raw. But she would also read to him at night from a heavy black book, her voice soft in the lamplight. Her husband, John, was a quiet man who smelled of iron filings and scorched earth. He had taught Conti how to set a fence post straight, how to read the clouds for rain, how to speak the white man's language until it felt like his own. They were good to him. They had found him half dead near a dry creek bed, a Comanche boy separated from his family, and they had made him their son. Then the attack came. He had been 8, maybe 9 years old. He remembered the smell of smoke first, thick and greasy. He remembered the screaming. It was not a battle. It was a butchering. When it was over, John and Sarah Parker were dead. The house was a smoking hole in the ground. He never knew for certain who had done it, Kiowa, perhaps, or white renegades looking for plunder. It did not matter. The result was the same. The white world, the world of straight lines and soft voices, had burned. He walked west. He walked until the hard leather shoes John Parker had given him fell to pieces. He walked until his feet bled. He walked until he found the people. His people. They took him back. He had to learn everything again. He had to learn how to be a Numunu, a Comanche. He learned the horse, the bow, the way of the warrior. He was smart, his mind sharpened by the white man's books. He was determined, his heart hardened by the fire. He learned quickly. He became Conti. Now, he was one of their best. He could read the soldiers' maps. He understood their patterns, their strange need to march in straight lines. He could listen to their talk in the trading posts, his face blank, and understand their fears. This skill made him valuable. It also made him different. Old Man 10 Bears, whose face was a map of dry rivers, watched him. "You look west, Conti," the old man had said just 2 nights past, his voice like stones rolling together. "But your spirit looks east. You do not sleep. Your shadow walks when you are still." Conti had stared into the fire. "The soldiers move north. They hunt." 10 Bears spat. "They always hunt, but you hunt something different. You hunt a ghost, this white woman." Conti had stood then, the firelight catching the hard lines of his face. "She is not a ghost. Her name is Eleanor. It is a white name." 10 Bears said, his disinterest a clear dismissal. "She is not our people." "She was taken by the people." Conti said, his voice low and tight. "She lived with the people for 3 winters. Now the soldiers have her. They found her. They say they will save her. They will put her in a square room in one of their forts. They will show her to the world as a broken thing. They will use her story to make us all monsters." "And what if she is broken?" 10 Bears asked, poking the fire. "What if she wants their square rooms?" "Then I will know," Conti said, "but they will not use her." He was hunting for Eleanor. He had never seen her face. He only knew the story, a story that had become a legend on the plains. To the soldiers, she was Eleanor Vance, the poor victim, a girl of 19 taken in a brutal raid on a small Texas settlement. She was the symbol of all they were fighting against, the innocent white flower they had to rescue from the savage. They had mounted patrols for her, burned villages, all in her name. But Conti had heard the other whispers, the whispers from the Kiowa, the Arapaho, even from some bands of his own people. The story changed. The white woman had not died of grief. She had not faded. They said she had learned the language. They said she rode a horse not like a captive, but like a free woman. They said she had stopped fighting and started living. She had become a different kind of symbol. To the people, she was a question, a possibility, a white woman who, perhaps, had seen the white world and the Comanche world, and had chosen. Conti, who straddled those 2 worlds every day of his life, felt the tear in himself. He had been a white boy in his heart. He was a Comanche warrior in his blood. He needed to find this woman. He needed to look into her eyes and see which world had won. He needed to know the truth before the soldiers buried it. The woman they all hunted had not always been a symbol. Her name was Eleanor Vance. She had been 19 years old, and she had been mending a yellow dress on the day her world ended. Her town was hardly a town, just a handful of wooden buildings huddled by a creek that ran dry most of the summer. She remembered the heat. She remembered the stillness of the air, the smell of dust, and her father's pipe smoke. The attack was not a sound. It was a silence, broken. A sudden, terrifying storm of horses and high, thin yells. They were on the town before the church bell could be rung. She remembered running. She remembered her father turning, his rifle half raised, before a lance took him in the chest. She remembered the smoke, acrid and choking. A warrior pulled her from the ground and onto his horse as if she weighed nothing. She fought. She screamed. She beat his hard back with her fists. She bit the arm that held her. He struck her, a single, flat-handed blow to the side of her head. She woke to movement. She was tied to a horse, her hands raw from the ropes. The world was a blur of grass and sky. The first weeks were a nightmare. She was property. She was less than property. She was a thing to be ignored, to be stared at, to be kicked if she was in the way. She was surrounded by a language that sounded like birds and stones, and it terrified her. She was heartbroken, traumatized, and starved. She tried to run, twice. The first time, a young boy on a pony chased her down and laughed as he roped her like a calf. The second time, she made it to a shallow river before an old woman found her. The woman, her face a mask of wrinkles, dragged her back to the camp and beat her with a heavy stick until she could not feel her legs. Eleanor lay in the dust of the lodge, waiting to die. She wanted to die. The old woman, the one who had beaten her, entered the lodge. She looked at Eleanor with a hard, dispassionate gaze. It was not hatred. It was the look a person gave a stubborn animal that refused to live. The old woman tossed a piece of dried, black meat onto the dirt floor near Eleanor's head. Eleanor stared at it. Her body ached. Her pride was shattered. She was so very, very hungry. She reached out a shaking hand, picked up the meat, and ate. It was not a choice. It was a necessity. Her old life was gone, dead, burned. This was all that was left. She began to learn. The old woman's name was Sings in the Wind. She did not teach Eleanor with kindness. She taught her with sharp commands and harder shoves. Eleanor learned the word for water, the word for fire, the word for hide, and scrape, and carry. She watched the other women. They worked. They worked harder than any man Eleanor had ever known. They built the lodges. They cured the buffalo hides, their arms slick with blood and fat. They butchered the meat. They owned the lodges. They owned the children. They had a power, a raw and earthy strength that she had never seen in the pale, corseted women of her former town. Eleanor's hands, once soft, grew rough. They cracked and bled, but they learned. She learned to scrape a hide until it was supple. She learned to find the sweet roots by the river. She learned to be quiet. She learned to listen. She could tell by the tone of a woman's call if a child was lost or if hunters had returned. She learned the hierarchy. She learned to make herself invisible when the men returned from a raid, their faces painted, their eyes wild. She learned how to share a quiet, wordless joke with the other women when the hard work of the day was done. One evening, a young girl, perhaps 7 years old, shyly offered Eleanor a comb carved from a piece of bone. Eleanor stared at it. It was the first gesture of kindness, the first gift she had received in over a year. She took the comb. She sat outside the lodge as the sky turned purple, and she pulled the comb through her own tangled, matted hair. She pulled until her scalp bled, and, for the first time, she did not weep for the girl she had been. She began, just slightly, to focus on the woman she was becoming. She was not Comanche, she knew that. She was still white, but she was not Eleanor Vance anymore. That girl was dead, back in the ashes of the town with the yellow dress. This person, this woman who could skin a rabbit and sleep on the hard ground and walk for miles without water. This person was alive. She had found a strength in herself, a core of iron that she never knew she possessed. This was the woman Conti searched for. This was the woman the soldiers now held. The year was 1850. The world was tearing itself apart. Conti looked south, toward the place the soldiers called Fort Griffin. He had heard the rumor from a trader. They had her. They had the white savage, and they were going to send her east, back to civilization. He and Eleanor were from two different worlds, two bloods, two pasts, but they were not separate. They were both caught in the teeth of this war, both searching for a piece of ground where they could simply be. Conti touched his heel to his pony's side. The horse moved forward, a shadow slipping through the tall grass. The dust rose to meet him. Fort Griffin was a scar on the land, raw and angry. It was not a place of comfort. It was a place of necessity, a high palisade of sharpened logs, a dusty square of beaten earth inside, and a flag that hung limp in the brutal, windless heat. Conti lay on his stomach on a ridge 200 yards away, the yellowed grass prickling his skin. He had been there for 2 days, unmoving, letting the sun bake his back. With him were 3 warriors he trusted with his life. Stonehand, a man as quiet and hard as his name, Little Fox, who was young but could move through a sleeping camp without waking a dog, and Gray Owl, whose eyes saw things in the dark that others missed. They lay beside him, merging with the land, just 3 more shadows in a land of them. Conti's world had shrunk to the walls of that fort. He ate dry jerky, drank sparingly from his water skin, and watched. He spoke the white man's language. He knew their routines. He knew the hollow sound of their bugle in the morning, the tired slump of the sentries in the afternoon, the spike of whiskey-fueled laughter from the officers' quarters at night. He was watching for a ghost, a story. On the second day, when the sun was a white hammer in the sky, he saw her. A door opened from the long, low building where the officers slept. 2 soldiers, their blue uniforms dark with sweat, stepped out. They were followed by a woman. Conti's breath caught in his throat. It was not a gasp, but a simple stop. She was dressed in a blue calico dress. It was a white woman's dress, buttoned high to the throat. It looked wrong on her. It looked like a costume, stiff and awkward. Her hair, which he had heard was the color of corn silk, was pulled back so tightly into a bun that it seemed to hurt her. She looked pale. She looked small. She walked with her eyes on the hard-packed dirt, her hands clasped in front of her. The soldiers walked her to a single wooden bench under the weak shade of the stable wall. They did not touch her. They did not speak to her. They stood a few feet away, their rifles held loosely. They were guards. Conti watched her face. It was not the face of a weeping, broken girl. It was a mask, her features held in a tight, unyielding neutrality. She was not a captive waiting for death. She was a woman holding herself together with sheer, unadulterated will. He saw, even from this distance, the iron that sings in the wind had hammered into her. This was not the girl from the sod house. This was someone new. One of the soldiers said something. She did not look at him. She did not move. He saw the soldier's brief flash of annoyance. He saw her silent, stubborn defiance. Conti knew. This was Eleanor Vance, and she was a prisoner here. Just as she had been a prisoner with the people, they had rescued her, only to put her in a different, cleaner cage. They were parading her like a trophy. He turned his head slightly, the dry grass scraping his cheek. He spoke to Stonehand in the Numunu tongue. "Tonight, when the moon dies." Stonehand grunted. "The woman." "The woman," Conti said. "And their horses. Little Fox will break the corral. Gray Owl and you will take the sentries on the east wall. The west wall is mine." Stonehand looked at Conti for a long moment. His eyes were flat. "She is white. She is a prisoner," Conti replied, his voice low and final. "They will send her away. They will put her in a city, in a room, and let people look at her. They will use her story to bring more soldiers, to kill more of our children." Stonehand considered this. It was sound logic, a warrior's logic. He nodded once. "We spill blood for a white woman." "We spill blood for the people," Conti said. But in his heart, a different truth was burning. He was doing this for her, for the look of stubborn iron he saw in her face. The night was a black, moonless void. The air was so still he could hear the cough of a soldier 100 yards away. They waited until the deep part of the night, 3 hours before dawn, when sleep is heaviest and the will to live is at its lowest. They moved like water flowing over rocks. Gray Owl was a shadow that detached itself from the ground, his knife already in his hand. Conti and Stonehand went for the west wall. Conti scaled the rough log palisade, his fingers and toes finding holds that did not exist. He reached the top. The sentry was leaning on the wall, looking out into the darkness. He was thinking of breakfast, or a woman in St. Louis. Conti dropped onto him from above. He wrapped one arm around the man's throat, cutting off his air. His knife went in hard and fast, under the ribs, seeking the heart. He held the man close as he died, a hot, wet sigh escaping him. Conti lowered the body gently to the wooden walkway. He looked over. Stonehand's sentry was also gone. Below, in the yard, Gray Owl had already vanished. Conti slipped down a support beam into the fort. The ground was cool. He could smell hay and stale whiskey. He moved toward the officers' quarters, the building where he had seen her taken. Stonehand melted away toward the east, a darker shadow in the dark. A sudden, sharp whistle cut the night. "Little Fox." It was followed by a human scream, and then the thunder. The sound of 100 horses panicked, their hooves drumming the earth as Little Fox and Gray Owl drove them toward the corral's broken fence. Chaos. "Indians!" The shout was high and terrified. "They are in the fort!" A rifle fired, a bright orange blossom of flame in the dark, illuminating running men in their sleeping shirts. Conti reached the door to her room. It was barred from the outside, a heavy wooden beam. They had locked her in. He put his shoulder to the door. It was solid. He heard boots running on the porch. A soldier appeared, his rifle half raised. Conti did not hesitate. He lunged, his knife leading. The soldier grunted, surprised. and fell backward. Conti smashed the bar off the door with the butt of his captured rifle and kicked the door open. The room was black. He smelled soap, and under it, the sharp, animal scent of fear. "Eleanor Vance," he said. He spoke in English. His voice was a low growl. He saw her then, a pale shape in the corner. She was holding a wooden chair, its legs pointed at him like a spear. "Get back," she whispered. Her voice was shaking, but it was full of hate. "There is no time," Conti said. He stepped into the room. "The fort is attacked. You must come with me, now." "Come with you?" she hissed. She saw his silhouette, the paint on his face, the weapon in his hand. He was the nightmare. He was the man who had stolen her life. "I will die first." He heard shouting just outside. "Search the building! Get the woman!" This was not a negotiation. He crossed the room in 2 strides. She swung the chair. He batted it aside. It crashed against the wall. She screamed then, a high, thin sound of pure terror. He grabbed her, his hand clamping over her mouth, his other arm encircling her waist. He lifted her off the ground. She fought him, kicking, biting his hand. She was strong. She was a wild thing. "I am saving you," he growled into her ear, his voice rough. He pulled her out of the room, into the pandemonium of the parade ground. Men were running everywhere. Muzzle flashes lit the yard in frantic, split-second photographs of confusion. Stonehand was there, holding the reins of 2 horses. He was bleeding from a gash on his head, but he was grinning. Conti threw Eleanor onto the back of one horse, swinging up behind her in the same motion. He wrapped one arm around her waist, pinning her against his chest. She was shaking so hard he could feel it through his body. "Go!" he yelled to Stonehand. They dug their heels in. The horses sprang forward, charging for the main gate, which was now wide open. Little Fox and Gray Owl were already through, disappearing into the darkness with the sound of the thundering herd. A line of soldiers was trying to form at the gate. They raised their rifles. Conti saw the flashes. He heard the whistle of the balls passing his head. Beside him, Stonehand grunted, a deep, wet sound. Conti looked. Stonehand was slumping, his face a mask of surprise. He fell from his horse, his foot catching in the stirrup for a second before he was dragged free, a broken shape in the dust. A white, hot rage filled Conti. He raised his rifle with one hand and fired, a defiant roar of gunpowder. He felt the horse beneath him surge, leaping over the body of a fallen soldier. Then they were through. They were out. They were free, riding into the endless, swallowing dark of the prairie. They rode for hours. Conti did not spare the horse. He pushed it until its breath was a ragged saw, until its flanks were white with lather. He held Eleanor against him. She had stopped fighting. She was limp, a dead weight, her face buried in his shoulder. He could feel her silent, desperate sobs. Just as the first hint of a pale, sick gray light touched the eastern sky, he pulled the horse to a stop. They were deep in a dry wash, the high dirt walls hiding them from the open plain. He slid from the horse, pulling her down with him. Her legs would not hold her. She crumpled to the ground, her body racked with shudders. Little Fox and Gray Owl appeared on their own horses, their faces grim, the stolen herd milling behind them. Eleanor looked up. She pushed her tangled hair from her face. She looked at Conti. He was not the monster from her capture. He was not the blank-faced soldier from the fort. He was something else. He was painted for war, covered in dust and sweat, and the blood of the man he had killed on the wall. His eyes were black and fierce. "Why?" she whispered. Her throat was raw. "Why did you take me again?" Conti stared down at her. He saw the terror in her eyes. But beneath it, he saw the iron. She was not weeping for what she had lost. She was angry. He had no answer for her. He looked back in the direction of the fort, his heart a cold stone in his chest. Stonehand was dead. Gray Owl dismounted and stood before Conti. He spoke in Comanche. You have done it. Rising Hawk, you have brought the ghost. She is not a ghost, Conti said. She is to them, Grey Owl said, gesturing to the east. And she is to us. 10 bears will not thank you for this. You have killed a warrior, for what a white woman who hates us. She does not hate us, Conti said, though he did not know if it was true. She hates being a prisoner. And what is she now? Grey Owl asked, his voice sharp. Conti looked down at Eleanor. She was watching them, her eyes moving from his face to Grey Owl's, her body tensed. She was terrified, but she was listening. She was trying to understand. Conti's heart was torn. He had acted from an impulse he did not understand, a feeling that went deeper than strategy. He had seen her in that cage, and the part of him that was Kent Parker, the part that had loved Sarah Parker, had reacted. He had started a fire that would burn them all. He had saved her, and in doing so, he had trapped her, and himself, between two worlds that would never let them be. The dry wash offered no comfort, only concealment. Grey Owl's face was a mask of cold fury, his gaze fixed on the body of Stonehand, which they had been forced to leave in the dust of the fort. Conti knew that look. It was the look of a man who had seen a brother die for nothing. We move, Conti said, his voice flat. He grabbed the reins of the horse he had taken for Eleanor. We ride north. We will split the herd. Little Fox, you take half. Drive them fast toward the Cimarron. We will meet you at the place of the red stones in 5 days. Grey Owl, you are with me. Grey Owl looked at Conti, then at Eleanor. She flinched under his gaze. She will slow us down, Grey Owl said in the Numunu tongue. She is bad medicine. A warrior is dead for this. She will not slow us down, Conti said. He grabbed Eleanor's arm. She cried out, a small, sharp sound. He pulled her to her feet. The blue calico dress was already dark with dirt and sweat. Get on the horse. I will not, she whispered, her voice shaking but full of defiance. I will not go with you. Conti did not have time for this. He heard, or perhaps only felt, the distant vibration of shod horses, the soldiers. He did not speak. He simply lifted her, his arms like steel bands, and threw her onto the horse's back. He mounted behind her, his body pressing her forward, and pinned her there. He kicked the horse into a desperate, scrambling run up the wash wall and out onto the open prairie. Grey Owl followed, his face like thunder. The first day was a blur of misery. They rode without stopping. The sun was a physical weight, pressing them into the earth. Eleanor's stiff dress, a symbol of the civilization that had caged her, became an instrument of torture. The high collar chafed her neck raw. The seams under her arms rubbed her skin until it bled. She was a skilled rider, her body hardened by 3 years with the people, but she was riding as a prisoner, her hands tight in front of her, her body crushed between Conti and the horse's mane. She hated him. She hated his silence. She hated the hard, unyielding line of his back against her chest. He was the man who had torn her from her home. He was the man who had just torn her from the fort. She did not know which was worse. The fort had been a prison of walls and rules. This was a prison of motion and heat. They stopped only when the horses were about to collapse. Conti slid to the ground and pulled her down. She fell, her legs numb. He cut the ropes on her wrists and shoved a water skin at her. She drank, the water tasting of leather and dust, and the simple relief of it made her want to weep. You must ride your own horse, he said in English. His voice was rough. We cannot travel this way. Grey Owl watched, his hand resting on his knife. He did not hide his contempt. Conti threw her a piece of dry meat. She stared at it. It was the food of the people. The food Sings in the Wind had forced her to eat. She picked it up and chewed, her jaw aching. I am not your captive, she said, her voice low. Conti looked up from checking the horse's hoof. His black eyes were empty. You are whatever you must be to survive. Get up, we ride. She learned. In the next 3 days, she learned again. She learned to ignore the pain in her body. She learned to ignore the raw, weeping sores from the calico dress. She learned to ride hunched low over the horse's neck to make a smaller target. She learned to watch Conti, to anticipate his movements, to be on her horse before he had to tell her. She saw a gray owl watching her, his eyes waiting for her to fail, to complain, to die. She would not give him the satisfaction. The iron that had been forged in her was strong. She would survive this, she would survive them all. The tension between them was a living thing, a fourth rider. Conti rarely spoke to her. He gave commands. Water. Eat. Ride. His anger at Stonehand's death was a wall around him, a wall she could not see past. Grey Owl spoke only to Conti, their voices low and fast, and every time, she felt his gaze on her, sharp as a lance. On the 4th day, the world became an inferno. They were in the Badlands, a place of cracked earth and red rock. The sun was a white hole in a sky of bleached blue. The air was so hot it was hard to breathe. The horses stumbled, their heads low. They had not seen water since the morning. They found a sliver of shade under a high rock overhang. It was not cool, but it was out of the direct sun. Grey Owl took the horses to a patch of withered grass. Conti slid from his pony, his body moving with a fluid exhaustion. Eleanor dismounted. She leaned against the rock wall. Her head was swimming. The world was pulsing red and black. She was dying of thirst. The calico dress was a suffocating shroud. She could feel the salt and grit grinding into the open sores on her neck. She fumbled with the buttons at her throat. Her fingers were thick and clumsy. She could not get the small, sweat-soaked button to pass through the hole. She whimpered, a low sound of pure frustration and despair. Conti watched her. He had been staring at the horizon, his face hard, but his gaze shifted to her. He saw her shaking hands. He saw the angry red line of her throat above the collar. He moved before he had thought about it. He stepped in front of her. She flinched violently, pressing herself back against the hot rock. Her blue eyes were wide with panic. "Do not touch me," she breathed. He did not listen. He raised his hand. It was a warrior's hand, scarred and stained. He was covered in the dust of their ride. He smelled of horse and sweat and blood. He touched the small, pearl button at her throat. She went rigid. He was so close she could feel the heat radiating from his body. She could see the individual specks of paint still left on his cheekbones. "You'll drive me crazy," she moaned. The sound was low, torn from her throat. It was not a plea. It was the sound of a person at their absolute limit, a body and a mind strained past the breaking point. The heat, the thirst, the fear, and now this, his touch. It was too much. But Conti did not stop. His face was a mask of concentration. The Comanche fingers drove on, lost in heat and dust. He moved to the second button, his knuckles brushing the damp, gritty skin of her collarbone. She gasped, a sharp intake of air. The touch was electric. It was not gentle. It was rough, his skin scraping hers. But it was not violent. It was something else. He was lost. He was focused on the simple task. The button, the skin, the heat. He was unfastening the cage she was in. He was, in this small, strange moment, freeing her. His mind was empty of Stonehand, of the soldiers, of the war. There was only this, the smell of her skin, salty and female, under the smell of the dust. He undid the third button, and the fourth. The dress gaped open, revealing the top of her simple chemise, which was plastered to her skin. The air, hot as it was, touched her flesh, and it was a profound relief. She was trembling, her eyes squeezed shut. He had stopped. His hand was still there, his thumb resting just above the hollow of her throat. He could feel her pulse, a frantic bird beating against his skin. A pebble skittered down the rock face. Gray Owl was back. He stood 20 feet away, his face unreadable. Conti pulled his hand away as if he had been burned. He stepped back, the spell broken. The heat and the silence rushed back in. Eleanor turned her face to the rock, her shoulders shaking, her hand clutching the open collar of her dress. Conti turned to Gray Owl. "We found no water," he said. His voice was hoarse. Gray Owl's eyes flicked to Eleanor, then back to Conti. "No, but I found tracks." Conti was instantly alert. "Soldiers!" "Kiowa," Gray Owl said. "A war party. 2 dozen, maybe more. They crossed the river this morning, heading south." Conti swore, a low, harsh sound. They were deep in territory that was not their own. The Kiowa were not their friends. They were trapped between their enemies. "We must go east," Conti said, his mind racing. "We will have to circle around the broken hills. It will add 2 days to the ride." 2 days, Gray Owl said. He looked at the water skins, which were almost flat. "She will not make it." Eleanor, who had been listening, turned around. Her face was pale, streaked with dust and sweat, but her eyes were blazing. "I will make it," she said, her voice a rasp. Conti looked at her, surprised by the venom in her voice. He saw, for the first time, not the captive, not the ghost, but the woman who had survived Sings in the Wind. He nodded once. "We ride." They pushed on, their thirst a constant, aching pain. The world was reduced to the space between their horses' ears. That night, they made a cold camp, chewing on dry meat that turned to ash in their mouths. The next day, as they moved through a narrow, winding canyon, Gray Owl held up his hand. Conti reined in, his head tilted, sniffing the air. Smoke. It was not the clean smoke of a Comanche fire. It was greasy. It smelled of bacon and bad coffee. Conti dismounted, motioning for the others to stay. He moved up the side of the canyon, his moccasins making no sound on the rock. He lay flat at the top and looked down. There was a camp. 4 men, white men. They were not soldiers. They were dressed in rough buckskins and dirty flannel. Their horses, tethered nearby, were loaded with packs. And from one of the saddles hung a string of fresh scalps. Long, black hair, Comanche hair. Conti felt the blood freeze in his veins. Scalp hunters, men who hunted the people for money. The lowest, most vile creatures on the plains. He slid back down the rock wall. He met Gray Owl's questioning gaze. "Hunters," Conti said, his voice deadly quiet. 4 of them. Gray Owl understood. His hand went to his knife. Conti looked back at Eleanor. She was huddled by the horses, watching them, her face tight with fear. He walked back to her. "There are men in the canyon," he said in English. "White men." She looked at him, her eyes searching his. "Soldiers." "No," Conti said, "not soldiers." She understood. She had heard the stories. She had seen the remains of a village after men like this had passed through. Her face went gray. She looked at Conti, this warrior, this savage who had captured her and touched her, and she knew, with a certainty that chilled her to the bone, that he was the only thing in the world standing between her and a fate worse than any she had ever imagined. Eleanor saw the world narrow to the space between Conti's shoulder blades. He and Gray Owl moved as one, not men, but 2 parts of a single, lethal thought. The fight was not a fight. It was an execution. It was brutal, fast, and silent. Knives. A war club. The only sounds were the thud of bodies hitting the hard-packed earth. A single, wet gasp, and the sudden, panicked stamp of the horses. In less than a minute, 4 men were dead. 4 white men. Men who looked like her father, her brothers, and she felt nothing. No, that was not true. She felt a cold, terrible wave of relief. Conti stood over the last man, his chest heaving. He was covered in blood. He looked up, his eyes black and bottomless, and found hers. He stared at her, as if seeing her for the first time. Then he turned away and methodically, almost calmly, began to inspect the camp. Gray Owl was already gathering the water skins. He found a small keg, sloshed it, and grunted in satisfaction. Water. He found bags of flour, smoked bacon, coffee, and a small tin of peaches. He held up the tin, looked at Eleanor, and then tossed it to Conti. Gray Owl's expression had not changed. He was a man who had just finished a hard, dirty job. Eleanor was shaking. She slid down the rock wall, her legs giving out. Those men, the scalps, they would have... She could not finish the thought. She looked at Conti. He was pulling the string of Comanche scalps from the saddle, his face a mask of cold fury. He handled them with a strange reverence, a terrible sadness in his hands. He was not a savage. He was a man. He was a warrior. The men he had just killed, the men who spoke her language and shared her skin, they were the savages. She looked down at her dress, the blue calico, the dress of her prison at the fort. It was stiff with her own dried sweat and blood. It was a shroud. It was the uniform of a world she no longer belonged to. She had been clinging to it, this last piece of her old life, and she suddenly hated it. She hated its buttons, its high collar, its confining seams. It was a lie. Conti walked over to her. He held out the tin of peaches. He had wiped the blood from his knife on the dead man's shirt. He used the tip to pry the lid open. He held it out to her. She looked at the syrupy, yellow fruit. It was the food of her past. She took it. She drank the syrup first, the sweet, thick liquid, an almost painful shock to her system. It was the most delicious thing she had ever tasted. She ate the fruit with her fingers, not caring about the juice that ran down her chin. Conti watched her. He had a long, shallow cut on his forearm. It was bleeding sluggishly. When she was finished, she set the tin down. She looked at the cut on his arm. She pointed. "You are hurt." He glanced at it. "It is nothing." "It will get dirt in it," she said. She looked at the supplies from the hunter's camp. She saw a roll of clean linen bandages. She saw a canteen. She walked on shaky legs, retrieved them, and came back to him. He tensed as she approached. He was not used to her moving toward him. She knelt in the dust in front of him. She poured a small amount of the precious water onto a piece of the linen and, very gently, began to clean the wound. He went absolutely still. His body was rigid, a coiled spring. He watched her hands, her pale fingers against his dark, blood-stained skin. He could smell the peaches on her breath. He could feel the warmth of her, a heat that had nothing to do with the sun. She worked in silence, her head bent. Her corn silk hair, escaping its tight bun, fell forward. She was no longer the defiant prisoner. She was not the screaming woman from the fort. She was just a woman, tending to a man's wound. Gray Owl watched them, his face dark. "We have their water," he said in the Numunu tongue. "We have their food. We should go." Conti did not answer. He was lost in her touch. It was the first gentle thing he had felt in a lifetime. When she was done, she tied the bandage. Her fingers were deft. She had learned this too. She had learned to heal. She looked up and met his eyes. The fear was gone. She was not afraid of him. She realized it with a sudden, sharp clarity. She was not afraid of his painted face, or his knife, or the blood on his hands. She had been terrified of the white world, terrified of the soldiers who locked her in a room, who looked at her like a broken animal, terrified of the men in this canyon who would have used her and killed her. Conti, he had taken her, yes, but he had also just saved her life. He was a man of his own world, with his own code, and that code, today, had included her. She was, in this moment, his people. "Thank you," she whispered. Conti's face was unreadable. He simply stood up, pulling her to her feet. "We ride." She looked down at her dress. "I cannot ride in this." He looked at the dress, then at her. He understood. He walked to the hunter's packs. He pulled out a pair of buckskin trousers. They were rough, but they were practical. He pulled out a plain, dark blue flannel shirt. He tossed them to her. "There," he said. He turned his back to her, a gesture of privacy that was more respectful than any white man had ever shown her. She stripped off the hated calico dress, her skin stinging in the hot air. She pulled on the shirt and trousers. They were too big, but they were soft. They were freedom. She rolled up the sleeves and tied the trousers tight with a piece of rope. She felt lighter. She felt real. When she was done, she touched his shoulder. He turned. He looked at her. He saw her, really saw her, for the first time. Not the ghost, not the captive, but Eleanor. Her hair was loose. Her face was streaked with dust and peach juice, and her eyes were clear. She was beautiful. "Good," he said. His voice was thick. They rode. The journey was different. They had water. They had food. The horses, fresh ones from the hunter's camp, were strong. But the greatest change was the silence. Before, it had been a heavy, angry thing. Now, it was a space that was simply quiet. Gray owls still rode apart, a silent, disapproving shadow, but Conti rode beside her. That night, they made a real camp. They found a small spring and built a tiny, smokeless fire. Gray Owl took the first watch. Conti sat by the fire, sharpening his knife. Eleanor sat on the other side, her knees drawn up. "Why?" she asked, her voice low. "Why did you come for me?" Conti did not look up from his whetstone. The sound of the stone on the steel was a soft, scraping rhythm. "I knew your story," he said in his careful English. "The white woman who lived with the people." "I was a captive," she said. "Yes," he said. "And then the soldiers took you, and you were a captive again." She absorbed this. "You were freeing me." He looked up then. The firelight flickered in his dark eyes. "I do not know. I saw you in that fort, in that dress. You looked like you were already dead. You looked like they had buried you." "And you," she said, her voice softer. "You are Comanche, but you speak English. You knew their fort, their routines. You are not like the others." He told her about John and Sarah Parker. He told her about the fire, about walking west until he found the people. He spoke of living in two worlds. His heart split down the middle. She listened, and her own heart, which she had thought was dead and hard, began to ache for him. He was like her. He was trapped. He was a man who belonged nowhere. "You are not alone," she said. He stopped sharpening his knife. He just looked at her. "When I lived with Sings in the Wind," she said, "I hated her. I hated everything. I wanted to die. But she taught me how to be strong. The white world, my old world, it made me weak. It wanted me to be soft and quiet and afraid. The people, they made me strong." He saw the iron in her. He saw the woman who had survived, and he felt a pull toward her that was stronger than thirst, stronger than battle rage. It was a kinship. It was a deep, aching understanding. They reached the red stones 2 days later. Little Fox was there, the herd of stolen horses grazing peacefully. His young face lit up when he saw Conti. Then his smile faded as he saw Gray Owl's grim expression, and then Eleanor. "Conti," Little Fox said, his voice troubled. "Stonehand. His body was found by the soldiers. He stopped. 10 Bears is angry. Stonehand's wife has cut her hair. She wails. She says your name. She says you killed her husband for a white woman." Conti's face hardened. He had known this was coming. "We ride." The journey back to the main encampment was fast. Eleanor rode with them, no longer a prisoner, but a silent, watchful part of their group. She wore the buckskin trousers, her hair braided in a single, thick plait. She looked like one of them, and yet she was not. When they rode into the camp, a silence fell. Women stopped their work. Children stopped their games. All eyes went to Kanti, and then to her. A woman's shriek cut the air. It was a sound of pure, animal grief. A woman with hacked, short hair ran from a lodge, her face smeared with ashes. She ran at Kanti's horse, beating at his legs with her fists. "Murderer!" she screamed in the Numunu tongue. "You killed him! You killed my husband for her, for that white witch!" She lunged at Eleanor. Kanti wheeled his horse, blocking her. The woman fell to the ground, sobbing, clawing at the dirt. Kanti dismounted. He stood tall, his face a mask of stone. 10 bears emerged from the council lodge. He was old, but his back was straight, his eyes sharp and unforgiving. "Rising Hawk," the old chief said. His voice was not loud, but it carried across the silent camp. "You lost a warrior." "He died in battle," Kanti said. "He died taking a white woman you had no order to take." 10 bears said, "He died for your pride, for your white blood." The accusation hung in the air, heavy and poisonous. Kanti felt the split in himself tear wide open. He was Kent Parker, the white boy. He was Kanti, the warrior, and he was failing them both. "I took her," Kanti said, his voice ringing with a strength he did not feel. "Because the soldiers were using her. They made her a symbol to hunt us. They put her in a cage." "And what is she here?" 10 bears swept his arm out. "She is a symbol again. She is the woman who cost Stonehand his life. His wife has no one. His children have no father, because you went to save a white ghost." "I am not a ghost," Eleanor's voice, clear and strong, cut through the tension. She spoke in English, but her voice was so full of passion that everyone understood. She swung down from her horse. She walked past Kanti and stood before 10 bears. She was shaking, but she did not back down. "I am not a ghost," she said again, looking the chief in the eye. "And I am not a witch. I am Eleanor. I lived with your people. I learned from Sings in the Wind." She pointed to her buckskin trousers. "I am not one of them." She pointed back toward the east. "And I am not one of you, but I am alive." She turned to Kanti. "He did not save a ghost. He saved me, and on the journey, we were attacked by white men, men who hunt your people for money." Her voice cracked. He and Grey Owl, they killed them. They saved my life." "Your warrior," she looked at Kanti, "is a man of honor. He did not let them kill me." A murmur went through the crowd. 10 bears' expression did not change, but his eyes narrowed. He looked from Eleanor to Kanti. "You have brought this trouble to our lodges." "Kanti," 10 bears said, "you have bled the people for a feeling. You have not acted as a warrior. You have acted as a man." He turned. "You will not sit in my lodge. You will not share my fire. You are, for now, apart." He looked at Eleanor. "Sings in the Wind will take you. You will work. We will see what you are." He walked back into his lodge. The crowd dispersed, leaving Kanti and Eleanor standing alone in the dust. Sings in the Wind, older, her face even more wrinkled, emerged and grabbed Eleanor's arm. Her grip was like iron. She looked at Eleanor's trousers with contempt, then pulled her toward her lodge. Kanti was left alone, an outcast. He had lost his place. He had lost his honor. He watched Eleanor being led away, a prisoner once more. He had tried to free her, and instead, he had only trapped them both. He loved her. He knew it now. He loved her strength, her fire, her iron will. And that love had cost him everything. He sank to the ground, his duty and his heart at war, a war that he knew had only just begun. Life in the camp was a hard, cold reality. Sings in the Wind had not softened. The old woman worked Eleanor from the moment the sun touched the sky until the last light faded. Eleanor dug roots, scraped hides, carried water, and mended lodges. It was the same work as before, but it was different. Before, she was a captive, a thing. Now, she was a pariah. The women of the camp watched her. Stonehand's widow, Masi, would stop her wailing to hiss at her, her eyes filled with a black, bottomless hatred. The other women followed her lead, turning their backs when Eleanor approached, leaving the heaviest loads for her. They did not speak to her. They did not see her. She was the white ghost who had cost them a warrior. Kanti was an outcast of a different kind. He was not allowed in the circle of lodges. He made his camp by the river, 100 yards from the others, a solitary fire in the dark. He hunted alone, bringing back deer and antelope, leaving the meat at the edge of the camp for the people to share. It was always taken. His skill was needed. But he was not. The warriors he had once led, the young men who had admired him, now averted their eyes. Gray Owl sat by his own fire, watching Kanti's small, distant flame, his face a mask of conflict. Only Little Fox defied the order. The young warrior, his face still holding the softness of youth, would sneak out to Kanti's camp in the deep night. He would bring a piece of warm bread or a word of news. "Red Otter speaks against you in the council," Little Fox whispered one night, his eyes troubled. "He says your white blood has made you weak. He says you care more for the white woman than for the people." Kanti stared into his fire. "Let him speak. Are the soldiers still moving west?" "Yes, fast. 10 Bears is worried. He says you are the only one who thinks like a white man, but he cannot ask for your counsel, not while Masi wails." Kanti's heart was a cold knot. He was trapped. His duty and his honor were at war. He would look up from his lonely camp and see Eleanor, a distant figure moving through the lodges, her head held high. She did not stumble. She did not weep. She met the hatred of the women with a silent, cold wall of endurance. He saw the iron in her, and his love for her became a physical ache, a sickness he could not be cured of. He had to see her. He had to speak to her. He waited for a night when the moon was a thin, broken sliver. He found her by the river, where she went late to fetch the last water, a task the other women forced on her. She was alone. The camp sounds distant behind her. She heard the snap of a twig and whirled, her hand flying to the small knife she now carried at her belt. "It is me," Kanti said, stepping from the shadows of the cottonwoods. She did not relax. She stared at him, her face pale in the starlight. They had not spoken, not truly, since their return. "You should not be here," she whispered. "They will see you. It will be worse for you." "I do not care," he said. He moved closer, and she did not back away. He could smell the wood smoke in her hair. He could see the exhaustion in the lines around her eyes. "This is my fault," she said, her voice low. "Your people, they hate me. They are right. A man is dead because of me." "He was a warrior," Kanti said, his voice rough. "He died in a fight. It was my choice, not yours." "It does not matter," she said. She looked down at the dark, moving water. "I have brought nothing but death to everyone I have ever known." "Do not say that." He reached out, his hand hovering, not quite touching her. "It is true," she said, and her voice was dead, stripped of all emotion. "My family, my first family, they died too." "The raid," he said. "I know." She looked up at him, her blue eyes reflecting the cold starlight. "You do not know. You think you know. You think it was just a raid, a faceless storm." "Eleanor," he began. "He had a red hawk painted on his shield," she said. Her voice was a monotone, a person reciting a lesson learned in hell. "The man, the one who killed my father. He had a red hawk, a cruel, ugly bird with its wings spread. He laughed." Kanti's blood stopped. It did not run cold. It simply stopped, leaving him a hollow man of ice. He could not breathe. He could not move. A red hawk. He knew that shield. He knew the high, barking laugh. It was Red Otter, a warrior of this band, a man he ate with, hunted with, fought beside. She saw his face. She saw the blood drain from it, the recognition, the absolute soul-shattering horror. Her own hand flew to her mouth, a small, choked sound escaping her. "No," she whispered. "Oh, God, no, it was... He is of this band," Conti said. His voice was not his own. It was a dead thing. "His name is Red Otter." She stumbled back, her hand grabbing a tree for support. The world, which had been so hard and real, dissolved into a nightmare. Conti, his people, the people who had saved her from the scalp hunters, the man who had touched her throat. They were the ones. They were the men who had slaughtered her family, who had taken her, who had set this entire, terrible story in motion. "You knew," she breathed, her voice thick with sudden, choking hatred. "You knew, all this time." "No," he said, the word torn from him. "I did not know. I swear to you, Eleanor, I did not know." "You are one of them," she shrieked, her control breaking. She launched herself at him, her fists beating against his chest, the knife forgotten. "You are all murderers. You and him, you saved me just to... What? Finish the job. Laugh at me." He grabbed her wrists, holding her. She fought him, a wild, cornered animal, all her pain and grief and rage exploding. "Liar!" she screamed. "Liar! Let me go, I hate you!" "Eleanor, stop!" he yelled, shaking her. "I did not know it was before. I was not there. But it was my people. I know." He held her tight against him as she sobbed, her strength finally spent. She was not fighting him. She was collapsing, her body racked with a grief so old and so fresh it was killing her. He held her, his own heart breaking, his warrior's honor, his love for this woman, his loyalty to his people. It was all a lie. He was a son of the men who had destroyed her. "What do I do?" she wept into his chest. "I cannot stay here. I cannot go back. Where do I go?" He had no answer. He just held her, his cheek resting on her hair, his eyes squeezed shut. He was a man drowning. A shout came from the camp. "Conti, Rising Hawk!" It was Little Fox, his voice high with panic. "The scouts! The soldiers are coming, a great army!" Conti pushed Eleanor gently away, his hands on her shoulders. "Go back. Go to Sings in the Wind. Stay in the lodge. Do not run." "Conti," she whispered, her eyes terrified. "What is happening?" "The war," he said, his face a mask of stone. "It is here." He ran, leaving her by the river. The camp was in chaos. 10 bears stood by the council fire, his face grim. A scout, his horse lathered and dying, was gasping out his report. 1,000 soldiers. More. And the big guns that shoot wagons. They are not following our trail. They knew where we were. They are coming straight for us." "A traitor," someone whispered. Red Otter stepped into the firelight, his arms crossed. "Or a white woman's lover." Conti ignored him. They knew. Conti said to 10 bears, "They are not hunting. They are herding. There is another column. From the north. They are pushing us into the Badlands." 10 bears looked at Conti. The anger was gone from the old chief's eyes, replaced by a cold, calculating fear. "Your white man's mind. Rising Hawk, tell me." "We cannot run," Conti said, his voice clear and sharp, the voice of a war leader. "We cannot hide. We must fight, but not here. They want us on the open plain, where their horses and long rifles can kill us all." He pointed west, the Box Canyon, the place of the high walls. "It is a trap," Red Otter sneered. "We will be caught." "It is a fortress," Conti said. "They cannot bring their big guns in. Their horses are useless. They will have to come at us on foot. We will be above them. We can hold them there." 10 bears nodded slowly. "It is our only chance. Red Otter, you will lead the warriors. Conti, you will get the women and children to the caves. You will guard them." It was a slap in the face. It was the task of a boy, or an old man. Red Otter smiled, a cruel, thin smile. "No," Conti said. The camp went silent. "I will fight," Conti said, his voice low. "I will not hide. Little Fox, Gray Owl, you will guard the women. I will fight." 10 bears looked at him for a long, hard moment. "So be it. We ride." The battle was a shrieking, smoky hell. They reached the Box Canyon just hours ahead of the soldiers. The women and children scrambled up the rocks to the shallow caves. Gray Owl and Little Fox standing guard, their faces grim. The warriors, perhaps 60 in all, spread out along the canyon rims. The soldiers, dismounted, came in on foot. They were not the tired, sloppy men from the fort. They were new, fresh, and they had repeating rifles. They came in waves, their blue uniforms stark against the red rock. The Comanche fought with a desperate, suicidal bravery. Arrows and bullets rained down on the soldiers. But for every soldier that fell, 3 more took his place. They were relentless. Conti fought from a high ledge, his captured rifle hot in his hands. He was a good shot. He made every bullet count. Beside him, a warrior he had known since boyhood grunted and fell, a dark hole in his chest. Red Otter was in the thick of it, leading small, desperate charges down the rock face. Fighting hand to hand, he was a demon, his red hawk shield seeming to turn the bullets. He was a great warrior, and Conti knew, with a sick certainty, that he was the man who had murdered Eleanor's family. The soldiers were pushing them back. Their officer, a man with a yellow beard, was smart. He was sending men up the canyon walls, flanking them. "They are too many," a warrior yelled. Falling back, his arms shattered. They were being pushed back, deeper into the canyon, toward the caves where the women and children were hidden. Conti looked down. He saw Eleanor. She was not hiding in the cave. She was out in the open, dragging a wounded boy, no more than 10 years old, to safety. A spray of bullets chipped the rock just above her head. She did not flinch. She kept pulling the boy. Conti's heart stopped. He saw the yellow-bearded officer spot her. He saw the man raise his pistol, taking aim. Conti did not think. He stood up on the ledge, in full view of the soldiers. "Heya!" he screamed, firing his rifle. The officer turned, startled. The bullet from his pistol went wide. Conti had the man in his sights. A searing, white-hot pain exploded in Conti's side. He staggered, his rifle falling from his hands. He looked down. A dark, wet stain was spreading across his buckskin shirt. He fell to his knees. He looked down at the canyon floor. He saw Red Otter, surrounded, go down, his red shield finally pierced. He saw Eleanor, safe, dragging the boy into the cave. And he saw the soldiers, a blue wave, surging forward, unstoppable. They were going to lose. They were all going to die. He saw 10 bears, his face a mask of despair. Conti looked up the canyon wall, past the caves. He saw it, a thin line, a goat trail, a way out. He locked eyes with 10 bears. He pointed, his arm shaking. The chief understood. He began to shout orders. "To the caves! Get to the high trail! Go, go!" The warriors began to fall back, a fighting retreat, giving their lives to buy seconds for the women. But the soldiers were too close. They would be on the women before they could even reach the trail. Conti tried to stand. His legs would not hold him. He looked at Eleanor. She was staring at him from the mouth of the cave, her face a mask of horror, her hand over her mouth. He had to make a choice. Die here, uselessly, or... He grabbed his fallen rifle. He looked at the half-dozen warriors left on the ledge with him, all wounded, all dying. "For the people!" he roared, his voice thick with blood. He lurched to his feet and charged, not away from the soldiers, but at them, down the rock scramble, straight into the face of the blue wave. The other wounded warriors, their death songs on their lips, followed him. It was a suicidal, glorious, insane charge. It was the last thing the soldiers expected. The blue line wavered, startled by this attack from men who were already dead. They stopped. They turned their rifles on this new, immediate threat. Conti saw Eleanor's face, her mouth open in a scream he could not hear. He fired his rifle. He saw a soldier fall. He drew his knife. He felt another bullet hit him. And another. He did not feel the pain. He felt only the fire, and her face, burning in his mind. He was Conti, the rising hawk. He was Kent Parker. He was a Comanche. He was a lover. He was a warrior. He crashed into the line of soldiers, his knife rising and falling. And he bought his people, and the woman he loved. One final, precious moment. Eleanor's scream was not a sound. It was the only real thing in a world that had dissolved into smoke and thunder. Conti felt it enter his body, a blade of pure sound, sharper than the bullets that had torn him apart. He was on his knees. The ground was not steady. It was slick, and the coppery smell of his own blood filled his nostrils. He could not feel his legs. He could feel the fire in his side, a white, consuming furnace. The blue wave of soldiers had stopped. His charge, the final, desperate lunge of 6 dying men, had bought what he needed. Seconds. He saw the yellow-bearded officer, the man who had aimed at Eleanor, not 10 feet away. The man's face was a mask of utter confusion, his pistol still smoking from a different shot. He was staring at Conti as if he was looking at a ghost. Why was this dead man still moving? Conti had no rifle. His knife was still in his hand, a piece of his own arm. He tried to raise it. His arm was a separate thing, a heavy log of wet wood. He could not lift it. He saw the soldiers all around him. They were a forest of blue legs and bayonets. The roar of the battle was a distant surf. He saw the officer raise his pistol, the black, round eye of the muzzle. It was an eye that saw nothing. Conti thought of the goat trail. He thought of the women, scrambling, their hands raw. He thought of the children. He thought of 10 bears, his old face grim. He thought of Eleanor. He saw her as she was by the river, her face pale in the starlight, her voice thick with a hatred that was really just a broken heart. He saw her furious eyes when he first took her from the fort. He saw her small, shaking hands as she unbuttoned the dress. Her moan of, "You'll drive me crazy," a sound of a spirit at its absolute edge. He saw her, kneeling in the dust, her pale fingers cleaning his wound. He was Kent Parker. He was Conti. He was a failure. He had failed the Parkers, who died in fire. He had failed the people, bringing this war to them. He had failed her, bringing her into a world that would only kill her. But in this last second, he was not a failure. He was a shield. He looked the officer in the eye. He saw the man's finger tighten on the trigger. Conti spat, a thick, bloody curse. He used the last of his strength, not to fight, but to smile. It was a terrible, bloody grin, a final act of defiance, a warrior's farewell. The officer's face contorted in a flash of rage. The pistol fired. The world did not go black, it simply vanished. Conti, son of 2 worlds, brother to none, lover of one, fell forward. He did not feel the impact. He was gone before his face touched the dust. The shot. It was final. It was a door slamming shut in a distant room. Eleanor watched him fall. He did not crumple. He fell forward. A tree cut at the roots. A proud, final gesture. A silence opened up inside her. The screams of the women, the roar of the rifles, the shouts of the soldiers. It all receded, becoming a thin, meaningless whine. He was gone. Conti was dead. Move, child, move. Sings in the wind was pulling her, her ancient fingers digging into Eleanor's arm. He died for your life. Do not throw it in his face. The words were a slap. He died for your life. Eleanor looked at the chaos below. Conti's sacrifice, and the sacrifice of the other warriors. had created a dam of bodies. It had stopped the blue wave for a precious, vital minute, but now they were surging past it. Little fox, gray owl to the trail. 10 Bear's voice, thinned by pain, was still a command. The two warriors were at the narrow opening of the goat trail, a bottleneck of stone. They were the last. "Get the women up," Gray Owl roared. He saw Eleanor, frozen, her face a mask of white shock. "Eleanor, now climb." A soldier, his face bright red and beaded with sweat, saw her. He broke from the pack, his bayonet leveled. "Got one," he yelled. "A white one." He lunged. Eleanor did not move. She was a stone. This was the world she came from. This red-faced, shouting man. This was her people. He was coming to rescue her. He was coming to save her from the savages. Sings in the wind. A woman old enough to be her grandmother stepped in front of Eleanor. The old woman held up a skinning knife. It was a pathetic defense. The soldier laughed. He swatted the knife away and shoved the old woman to the ground. He grabbed Eleanor's arm. "Come on, girl. You are safe now." His grip was like iron. He smelled of whiskey and sweat. His eyes were not kind. They were triumphant. He was a man who had won a prize. Eleanor looked at his face. She looked at Sings in the wind, struggling to rise from the dust, her face a mask of hate. She looked at Conti's body, a still, dark shape being trampled by the advancing soldiers. This was her choice. Go with this man. Go back. Go back to the dresses, the small rooms, the men who looked at her like a prize or a broken doll. Go back to the world that had sent these soldiers to kill the man who had seen her soul. Or fight. A blur of motion. Little Fox, the young warrior, his face a painting of pure, suicidal rage, slammed into the soldier from the side. He had no bullets. He had only his knife. The soldier grunted, surprised. The two men fell in a tangled heap, rolling in the dust. The soldier was bigger, stronger. "Climb!" Little Fox screamed at her. His voice choked. "Climb for him." For him. Eleanor grabbed the wounded boy. She hauled him to his feet. She shoved him at the rock wall. "Go!" she screamed. She turned back. Sings in the wind was on her feet. Eleanor grabbed the old woman's hand. "Come!" She began to climb, pulling the old woman with her. Gray Owl was at the top of the first ledge, his face a grim, carved mask. He was firing his rifle, using it as a club, knocking soldiers back as they tried to follow. "Hurry!" he bellowed. Eleanor pushed Sings in the wind up. "Climb." She looked down. Little Fox was on his back. The soldier was kneeling over him, raising his bayonet for the final thrust. Little Fox caught Eleanor's eye. He did not look afraid. He looked proud. He smiled, a bloody imitation of Conti's final grin. Then he arched his back, his knife finding the soldier's groin. The soldier screamed. Another soldier shot Little Fox in the chest. Eleanor tore her eyes away. She climbed. Her hands were raw. The rock was sharp. It tore her palms. She did not feel it. She was between life and death. She was between the world of her past and the world of her future. Her past was down there. It was a world of fire, of men who called her a prize, of soldiers who killed what they did not understand. It was the world that had murdered her father. It was the world that had murdered Conti. Her future was up. It was a world of pain, of hunger, of people who hated her. It was the world of her family's killers. It was the world of the man who had died for her. It was an impossible, terrible choice. It was no choice at all. Conti had died a Comanche. She would live. She climbed past Gray Owl, who was shoving a boulder down onto the soldiers below. She reached the top of the ridge. 10 Bears was there, leaning against a rock, his legs shattered. He looked at her. He did not see a white woman. He saw a survivor. The yellow-bearded officer was on the canyon floor, staring up at them. He saw her, a tiny figure on the skyline, disappearing, He raised his pistol and fired. A futile, angry shot. The bullet whined off the rock. Hundreds of feet below her, Eleanor stood on the top of the ridge. She looked back one last time. She saw the smoke, the blue uniforms, the still, broken bodies of the warriors. She saw the place where Conti lay. She felt her heart tear in two. One half of it fell back into that canyon, to lie in the dust with him. The other half, cold and hard as iron, stayed in her chest. She took a breath, the air raw in her throat. She turned her back on the battle. She turned her back on her old world. She faced the endless, unknown, unforgiving wilderness and followed 10 bears. The goat trail was a ladder to hell, or from it. Eleanor could not tell. All she knew was the burn in her legs, the raw, torn skin of her palms, and the high, thin wail of a child behind her. The sounds of the battle, the roar of rifles and the death screams, faded below them, swallowed by the wind. They were replaced by the sounds of their own suffering, the gasps of the women, the scrape of moccasins on stone, and the low, constant, agonizing groans of 10 bears. They did not run, they climbed, they scrambled, they crawled. Grey Owl was at the front, his rifle a club, his face a mask of stone, pushing, pulling, driving them upward. Eleanor was in the middle, her hand still locked with Sings in the Wind. Behind her, Masi, the widow of Stonehand, was carrying one of her own children and dragging another. The hatred that had separated them was gone, burned away in the canyon, leaving only the raw, shared core of survival. When they reached the high plateau, a vast, wind-scoured mesa of flat rock, Grey Owl did not let them stop. "Move," he commanded, his voice a raw bark. "Move until we find water, or we die." They were a broken, ragged line of ghosts. Less than 30 of them. 4 old men, a dozen women, a handful of children, and 1 warrior. Grey Owl. 10 bears. His face the color of wet ash, was being half carried by 2 of the other old men. Eleanor's heart was a cold, empty hole in her chest. Conti. The name was a stone in her throat. She could see him, falling, his terrible, bloody smile. A final, "I win" to the world that had killed him. "He died for your life, do not throw it in his face," Sings in the Wind's words echoed. A brutal rhythm to her steps. "Walk, don't throw it away, walk." They walked for hours. The sun began to set, staining the western sky a violent, bloody red, the color of the canyon, the color of his shirt. Eleanor stumbled. "Get up," Sings in the Wind hissed, yanking her arm. The old woman's strength was terrifying. "He is hurt," Eleanor said, her voice a croak. She was pointing at 10 bears. The chief had fallen to his knees. The 2 old men could not lift him. His leg was a ruin, the buckskin trousers soaked black with blood. Grey Owl stalked back, his face a mask of thunder. He looked at his chief. He looked at the dying light. He looked at the women, all of them at the edge of collapse. He had made a choice. "We cannot carry him," Grey Owl said, his voice flat. "He is a warrior. He knows the way." "It was a death sentence? Leave him. Let him die with honor. Here, under the open sky." 10 bears heard him. He nodded, his face tight with pain. "Go, take the women. I will sing my song." No. The word was not loud, but it cut through the wind. It was Eleanor. Grey Owl turned, his eyes blazing. "You," he snarled. "You have done enough." Eleanor walked past him, ignoring him. She knelt in the dust in front of 10 bears. She looked at the shattered leg. She remembered Conti's arm, the feel of the bandage in her hands. She remembered the wounded boy she had dragged into the cave. "This is not his death song," she said. She looked up, not at Grey Owl, but at the other women. "Sings in the Wind, I need water, just a little. Masi, your knife." Masi stared at her, her eyes wide with grief and confusion. "Your knife," Eleanor snapped, her voice ringing with an authority she did not know she possessed. "He died for all of us. Are we to let his chief die in the dirt?" The mention of sacrifice, of his name, broke the spell. Maasi fumbled at her belt and gave Eleanor her knife. Sings in the Wind unhooked a near-empty water skin and passed it over. Eleanor took a breath. "Hold him," she said to the old men. She took the knife and sliced through the buckskin trouser. The wound was a mangled horror of bone and blood. Ten Bears hissed, his body rigid, but he did not cry out. Eleanor worked. She did not think. She only acted. She washed the wound with the last of the water. She saw the main artery, miraculously, was not severed. The bone was broken. "I need wood," she said. "Straight, strong." Gray Owl, his face unreadable, disappeared into the dusk. He returned with 2 straight, strong branches from a dead cedar. Eleanor looked at the other women. "Your dress," she said to one. "Tear it, strips, now." The woman, who had once sneered at Eleanor, did as she was told, ripping her hide dress into long pieces. Eleanor set the bone. She did not know how. Her hands just knew. She felt the grate of it, and Ten Bear's body arched in a silent scream. She laid the splints against his leg and began to bind them, pulling the strip so tight her fingers ached. She worked with a focused, desperate, cold efficiency. She was not saving a man. She was fighting. She was fighting the world that had taken Conti. She would not let it take one more. When she was done, she sat back on her heels. The leg was bound. It was a crude, brutal piece of work, but it was done. Ten Bears looked down at his leg. He looked at her. Her face was streaked with his blood and her own sweat. Her hands were torn. Her eyes were as dead and as fierce as a hawk's. "He chose well," Ten Bears whispered. Gray Owl was staring at her. The hatred in his eyes was gone. It was replaced by something else. Awe, respect. "We cannot carry him," Gray Owl said again, but his voice was different. "We will make a travois." Eleanor said, 2 poles, a blanket. 2 women can pull it." She stood up. "I will be one of them." She had made her decision. It was not a grand declaration. It was this. It was the act of tying a splint, of refusing to let another man die. It was the choice to pull, to work, to bleed with these people. They traveled all night. Eleanor and Maasi pulled the travois. They did not speak. There was no need. Their shared grief, their shared work, was a language of its own. Just before dawn, Gray Owl found it, a hidden spring, weeping from a high rock face, spilling into a stone basin. It was a place of life. They collapsed. The women and children drank. Then the wounded. Eleanor brought water to Ten Bears. He drank, and his eyes cleared. They were alive. They were free. The soldiers were far behind, in the canyon, with their dead. The soldiers had won the battle, but this small, broken band, they had won the war. They had survived. They had escaped. Conti's sacrifice had purchased their freedom, a freedom they were now living, breathing, and drinking at this hidden spring. Ten Bears called them together. He sat propped against a rock, his splinted legs stretched out. He looked at the small group. He saw the faces of wives without husbands, children without fathers. "We are few," he said, his voice quiet. "The people are broken. We have lost warriors. We have lost Rising Hawk." Maasi let out a low keen of grief, and the other women joined her. It was the sound of a people's heart breaking. Eleanor stood apart, her own grief a cold, hard stone she could not pass. Ten Bears held up his hand. "He is gone, but he did not die as a man with a split heart. He did not die as a white man. He died as Numunu. He died for his people. He died for all of us." He looked at Maasi. "His blood has paid for the blood of Stonehand. His death has paid for all debts. There is no more anger. There is only sorrow. He fixed his gaze on Eleanor. She met his eyes, unblinking. You, he said, the white woman. He died for you. He started this fire for you. I know, she whispered. You are not our captive. 10 Bears said, you are not our slave. You are the one Kanti died for. You are free. The white world is that way. He pointed east. You can go. No one will stop you. Grey Owl will give you food and water. This is not your fight. This was the moment, the final choice. She could go back. She could find a fort. She could put on a blue calico dress. She could be Eleanor Vance again, the poor, broken victim. She could live in a square room and be safe. She could be the girl she was, before the fire. She looked east. She saw nothing. Nothing but smoke and ghosts and men who saw her as a prize. She saw the face of the soldier who had grabbed her. She looked at the people around her. Sings in the wind, watching her with sharp, bird-like eyes. Grey Owl, his face scarred and grim, but his anger gone. Masi, her face swollen with tears, but her eyes no longer holding hate. 10 Bears, the wounded chief, the children, their faces dirty, their eyes huge and lost. These were the people who had killed her family. They were also the people Kanti had chosen as his own. They were the people he had died for. She thought of his last bloody smile. She turned her back to the east. She walked to the small, wounded boy she had pulled into the cave. He was shivering, his eyes wide with fever. She knelt beside him. She took a piece of her own ripped clothing and dipped it in the cool water of the spring. She looked up at 10 Bears. Her voice was steady. It was a new voice. This is my fight, she said. I am not Eleanor Vance. She is dead. She died in a fire a long time ago. She placed the cool cloth on the boy's forehead. I am his. I am the one he did not throw away. I will not throw him away. She had stayed. She had chosen. She would continue the fight. Not with a rifle, but with her hands, with her heart, with the iron will Sings in the Wind had forged in her and the love Kanti had died for. She was free. She was truly, finally, terribly free. The new life began at the spring. It began with the taste of cold water and the smell of blood. There was no victory. There was only survival. The word love was a luxury, a thing from a different world. But the force of it, the thing Kanti had unleashed in her, was as real and as necessary as the water she drank. It was the iron in her spine. It was the reason she was not dead. She was not grieving. Not yet. The shock was a cold, hard shell around her heart. There was no time for the luxury of tears. There was only work. The wounded boy she had saved, the one whose forehead she had bathed. His name was Koto. He was 9 years old. His arm was broken by a spent bullet, a simple, clean break. She bound it, her hands moving with the same strange certainty she had felt with 10 Bears. Sings in the Wind watched her, the old woman's eyes missing nothing. The old woman did not help, but she did not interfere. She watched, her face a mask of ancient, critical judgment. Masi, Stonehand's widow, sat rocking her remaining child, her eyes vacant, her hair still hacked short in mourning. Her grief was a closed, silent thing. Eleanor approached her, holding out a strip of dried meat from the hunter's pack. It was their only food. Masi looked at the meat, then at Eleanor. Her eyes were dead. Eat, Eleanor said, her voice rough. Your child is hungry. Masi did not move. Eleanor tore a small piece of the meat and held it to the child's mouth. The boy, who was perhaps 4 years old, took it and chewed, his eyes wide and terrified. Eleanor tore another piece and held it to Masi's lips. He died for this, Eleanor whispered, her voice fierce. For your son, for you. Do not throw it away. Eat. Masi's dead eyes flickered. She saw Kanti. She saw her husband, Stonehand. She saw the cost, and she saw this white woman, her face streaked with dirt and blood, her eyes blazing with a cold, hard fire. She opened her mouth. She ate. It was a truce. It was a beginning. Gray Owl, now the band's only warrior, the de facto leader. Watch this. He said nothing. He was busy cleaning his rifle, his hands methodical. But he saw the white woman who was not white, tending to the chief, tending to the wounded, feeding the widows. He saw the one Rising Hawk had died for. 10 Bears was in a fever. The pain from his leg was a fire in his blood. He thrashed, his voice calling out to the spirits, to the warriors who were gone. Red Otter, Stonehand, Little Fox, and Canty. Eleanor sat by him for hours. She was the only one he seemed to recognize. She bathed his face. She forced water between his cracked lips. He would fall into a fitful sleep, his hand gripping her wrist, his knuckles white. "The heart is split," he murmured, his eyes closed. "The white world, the people. It is a war inside." "Rest," Eleanor whispered. "The war is over." "No," he said, his eyes opening, clear and lucid for a moment. He was looking at her. Canty, he finished it. He was not split at the end. He was one. He was Numunu. He chose. "Yes," she said, her throat tight. "He chose you," 10 Bears said. "And you have the iron." He saw it, the iron of the people. He closed his eyes. "You are not a white woman. You are a Comanche heart." He fell back into the fever. But the word stayed with Eleanor. A Comanche heart. Her love for Canty had not been a weakness. It was not a girlish romance. It was a forging. His love, his choice, his death. It was the fire, and her own strength. The strength she had found with Sings in the Wind was the metal. She was being reborn in that fire. She was no longer a thing acted upon. She was a woman who acted. She was strong, not just because of the love Canty had given her, but because of the strength he had seen in her. He had not died to make her strong. He had died because he knew she was strong enough to live. This was the resurrection. It was not Canty's, it was hers. They stayed by the spring for 3 days, a small, wounded band of animals, licking their wounds, gathering their strength. Gray Owl hunted. He returned with a single, scrawny deer. It was a feast. They began to talk. The women, their wailing done, began to speak of the future. Where would they go? How would they live? There were no men to hunt, no warriors to protect them. "We will find the other bands," Gray Owl said, his voice flat. "We will go to the Staked Plains. The soldiers will not follow us there. It is a long journey." Sings in the Wind said, 10 Bears cannot ride. The children are weak." "We will walk," Eleanor said. All eyes turned to her. "We will walk," she said again, her voice steady. "We will make more travois. We will carry the children. We will hunt what we can. We will not die here." Gray Owl looked at her. He nodded. "We will walk." She was no longer an outsider. She was a voice. She was part of the we. On the morning of the 4th day, they prepared to leave. Eleanor was checking the splint on 10 Bear's leg. It was healing. The fever was down. "You have good hands," he said, "the hands of a healer." Eleanor looked at her hands. They were raw, her fingernails broken, the palms scarred from the rocks. They were not the hands of Eleanor Vance. They were the hands of a survivor. "They are working hands," she said. As she stood, Mossy approached her. The widow's face was still a mask of grief, but the vacant look was gone. She held out a pair of moccasins. They were old, but well made. "Your feet," Mossy said, pointing to the tattered, ruined boots Eleanor had taken from the hunters. "They are no good." Eleanor stared at the moccasins. They were a gift. They were acceptance. They were forgiveness. They were a sisterhood forged in blood and loss. She sat on the rock. She pulled off the broken boots, the symbols of the white world. She slid her bare feet into the soft, supple hide. They fit. She stood up. She was dressed in buckskin trousers, a flannel shirt, and Comanche moccasins. She looked at Masi. There were no words. She simply placed her hand on the other woman's shoulder, a gesture of shared strength. She would never forget him. Kanti. His memory was not a ghost that haunted her. It was a fire inside her. It was the love that had crossed a border so vast, no one could measure it. The border between white and Comanche, between captive and free, between man and woman. His love had not been a chain. It had been a key. It had unlocked the iron cage she had built around her own heart. He, the man of two worlds, had shown her that she did not have to choose. She did not have to be one thing or the other. She could be herself, a woman who was both, and therefore, something new. She turned to the travois. She picked up the poles. She was ready to pull. Her love for him was not a memory. It was her life. It was the strength she used to put one foot in front of the other. It was the decision to live, to fight, to heal. She would live a life free from the judgment of either world. She would live, as he had died, as a person of honor, a person who had chosen. His love had no borders. It was in the wind that blew across the mesa. It was in the heat of the sun. It was in the iron of her own unbreakable will. The journey to the staked plains was a walk through a silent, sun-bleached graveyard. They were a tribe of ghosts, led by a single, grim warrior and a crippled chief. The world was reduced to the scrape of the travois poles on the rock, the cry of a hungry child, and the constant, aching wind. Eleanor pulled beside her. Masi pulled. They had fashioned a second travois for the wounded boy, Koto, and the smallest children. The two women, once separated by a gulf of hatred and blood, were now bound by a shared rhythm of labor. Pull, step, pull, step. Their grief for the men they had lost stonehand. Kanti was burned away each day by the brutal, physical demands of survival. Grief was a luxury they could not afford. Love was not a memory. It was the calloused skin on her palms. It was the set of her jaw as she pushed against the wind. It was the act of getting up every single morning in the cold, gray dark, and choosing to live. Sings in the wind and the other old women walked ahead, their ancient eyes scanning the ground, finding the tiny, bitter roots that kept them alive. Gray Owl was a constant, restless shadow, scouting ahead, behind, his rifle never leaving his hands. He was their eyes, their ears, their only defense. Eleanor's status had changed. No one spoke of it. It was simply a fact. She was no longer the white captive. She was not the pariah. She was Tawonibi, the healer. The name 10 Bears had given her in his fever. She was the one who checked the chief's leg every night, cleaning it with hoarded water, her hands firm and knowing. She was the one who knew how to make a poultice from the yucca root, a skill Sings in the Wind had taught her, and which she now used to treat the old woman's own aching joints. Sings in the Wind watched her, the old woman's hard, black eyes holding a new, strange light. It was not kindness, it was recognition. The old woman had tried to forge Eleanor into a tool. She had, instead, forged a weapon. One evening, as they camped in the shelter of a low butte, Masi sat sharpening a knife. Her movements were short, angry. Her 4-year-old son was crying, a thin, hungry wail. "There is no more meat," Masi said, her voice flat. "Gray Owl found nothing today." The child cried harder. Masi raised her hand, her patience worn thin by grief and starvation. "Wait," Eleanor said. She walked over, her own stomach a tight, aching knot. She sat on the ground in front of the boy. She looked him in the eye. "Koto," she called to the older boy, the one she had saved. "Do you remember the story I told you? The one about the white man's fort?" The children, starved for anything other than misery, gathered. Eleanor began to speak. Her voice was low, and at first, hesitant. She did not speak of the battle. She spoke of Kanti. She spoke of how he had known the white man's language. She told them how he had been a boy named Kent Parker, who learned to read from a book. She told them how he had become Rising Hawk, who could read the silent language of the stones. She told them of his two hearts, his two worlds, and how, in the end, he had made them one. The children were silent, their hunger forgotten. The women, too, had stopped their work. They listened. Massey's hand had lowered. She was listening. Eleanor spoke of his sacrifice, not as a tragedy, but as a choice for them. "He did not die because he was weak," she said, her gaze moving from child to child. "He died because he was strong. He died so that we," and she stressed the word, "could walk, so that you," she touched the crying boy's cheek, "could live. He bought your life. It is a precious thing. You must not waste it on tears. You must be strong, like he was." The boy's sobs quieted. He looked at her, his eyes wide. Eleanor had not intended to give a speech. She had only wanted to quiet a child. But her words, spoken in the quiet twilight, had changed something. Kanti was no longer a source of blame. He was not a painful memory. He was a story, a legend. He was the man who had loved their people, all of them, enough to die for them. And this woman, this white woman, was his echo. She was his living will. They walked for 10 more days. They were skeletons, moving through a land of skeletons. Then Grey Owl found them. It was another band, not soldiers, Comanche. They were a larger group, maybe 100, but they were in no better shape. They were led by a chief named Ironshirt, a hard, bitter man who had lost too many battles. His people were demoralized, his warriors angry and unpredictable. They stared at Eleanor as if she were an apparition, a white woman, in moccasins and buckskins, walking beside Grey Owl, helping to pull the travois of 10 bears. 10 bears, his leg healing, his voice weak but his authority still intact, told the story. He spoke of the battle at the Box Canyon. He spoke of the warriors who had fallen. He spoke of Red Otter and Little Fox and Stone Hand. And then he spoke of Kanti. He told of his final charge. He told of his sacrifice. And then he looked at Eleanor. "She is Tawonibi," 10 Bears said, his voice ringing with a strange pride. "She has the iron heart. She is the one Rising Hawk died for. She is our daughter." The women of Ironshirt's band stared at her. They were used to captives. They were used to slaves. They were not used to this. They saw the way Massey walked beside her, not as a rival, but as a partner. They saw the way Sings in the Wind deferred to her judgment on the wounded. They saw a woman who was owned by no one, who had no husband, no warrior to speak for her, and who yet walked with the authority of a chief. Eleanor became a symbol. She did not ask for it, she did not want it, but she became it. She was the walking, breathing embodiment of Kanti's love, a love that crossed borders, that defied tribes, that chose its own path, and she was a symbol of freedom. She, a woman, had been offered the safety of the white world, and had chosen this. She had chosen the people. Her presence was a quiet challenge. The women of Ironshirt's band were beaten down. Their men were angry, their losses heavy. They were treated as property, their voices silenced by the men's despair. But they watched Eleanor. They watched her tend to the wounded. They watched her speak to Grey Owl as an equal, discussing the best way to ration the food. They watched her take no share for herself until every child had eaten. One night, a woman from Ironshirt's band stumbled, spilling a water skin. Her husband, a warrior with a scarred face, struck her. He hit her hard, a backhanded blow that sent her sprawling. "You are useless," he spat. "We are dying, and you waste water." The woman cowered, her hand to her bleeding lip. This was normal. This was life. Eleanor, who had been skinning a rabbit Grey Owl had caught, stopped. She put down her knife. She stood up. She walked over, her moccasins making no sound. She stood between the warrior and his wife. She was not as tall as him. She had no weapon. She was just a woman, her hands bloody from the rabbit. The warrior stared at her. "This is not your lodge. White woman, go!" "She is one of the people," Eleanor said, her voice quiet, but carrying in the cold air. "She is a mother. You will not strike her." The warrior laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. "She is my wife. I will do as I please. Go before I strike you." "Do it," Eleanor said. She did not move. "Let everyone see. We have been hunted by the soldiers. We have been torn apart. We have lost our best warriors. And now, you will fight a woman. Is this what we are? Is this what he died for?" She pointed, not at him, but at the sky, at the memory of Kanti. "Rising Hawk died for the people," she said, her voice rising, ringing with the cold fire of her will. "He did not die so you could beat your wife. He died so she could be free, so we could be free." The camp was silent. The warrior looked at her. He saw no fear in her eyes. He saw no anger. He saw a conviction as solid and as cold as the stone beneath his feet. He saw 10 bears, watching. He saw Gray Owl, his hand on his knife. He saw his own wife, staring at him, not with fear, but with a new, strange light in her eyes. He lowered his hand. He turned. His shoulders slumped, and walked away into the darkness. Eleanor turned to the woman. She held out her hand. The woman stared at it for a second, then took it. Eleanor pulled her to her feet. She had not won a battle. She had done something more. She had shown them a different way. She had reminded them, not of what they had lost, but of what they were fighting for. From that night, the women of the camp were different. They held their heads higher. They began to speak. They organized the food. They took charge of the children. They looked to Eleanor, not as a leader, but as an example. She was the symbol of their own inner strength. She was the proof that love was not a weakness, but the strongest weapon they had. She was the legacy of the man who had crossed the world for her, and in doing so, had given her a new one. The years that followed were not kind. They were simply years. They were a succession of winters and summers, of hunger and of plenty, of dry heat and biting cold. The staked plains, the Llano Estacado, was a hard, flat, unforgiving country. It was a place that did not suffer fools. It was a place that demanded everything, every day. It was, for Eleanor, home. The band of survivors, the broken remnant of 10 Bears' people, had merged with Iron Shirt's band, but they were never truly one. They were two, a core of hard-bitten survivors, annealed in the fire of the Box Canyon. 10 Bears lived for 2 more years, his leg a badly healed, crooked thing, but his mind sharp. He sat by the fire, his authority undiminished, and he would often call for Ta-wo-ni-bi. He would make her sit. "Tell me again," he would say, his old eyes fixed on the flames. "Tell me of the man with 2 hearts." And Eleanor would tell the story. She would tell it to him, and to the children who gathered, and to the women who worked. She told the story of Kanti. She told of Kent Parker. She told of the fire that took his white family, and the search that led him back to the people. She told of his skill with the white man's words, and his strength with the Comanche bow. She told the story not as a tragedy, but as a map. It was the map of a man's soul. When 10 Bears finally died, he died in his sleep, his hand gripping hers. His last word was Kanti's name. Gray Owl became the chief. He was a practical man, a man of silence and action. He did not have 10 Bears' vision, or Kanti's split mind. He was a hunter. He was a protector. He looked to Eleanor, not as a woman, but as a counsel. "You understand them," he would say to her, when the rumors of soldiers came, carried on the wind. "You have his mind. What do they want?" Eleanor had become something new. She was not a wife. She never remarried. She was not a warrior. She was the healer. Tawonibi. She was the one who set the bones, who knew the herbs, who sat with the dying. She was also the memory, sings in the wind. Now, an ancient, frail creature who moved like a dry leaf had passed her stories to Eleanor. Eleanor, the white woman, became the keeper of their traditions. She taught the children the proper way to honor the buffalo. She knew the songs for the new moon. She knew the stories of the coyote. She kept their culture alive, holding it safe, a precious, burning ember in her heart. She lived not for herself, but for the legacy Conti had left her. His legacy was not his love. It was his people. The world outside was changing. It was the 1860s. The blue soldiers were fighting other blue soldiers, far to the east, in a war that had nothing to do with the people. The pressure lessened. For a time, they had space. They had freedom. Eleanor was a woman now, past 30. The corn silk hair was darker, streaked with a sun-bleached white. Her face was brown as any Comanche, her skin a map of sun and wind. Her eyes, still a shocking clear blue, held the stillness of the plains, an endless, deep calm. She was happy. It was not a giddy, smiling happiness. It was the deep-rooted happiness of purpose. She was needed. She belonged. Masi, the widow of Stonehand, was her closest friend. They were sisters. They raised their children together, Masi's son and the other orphans of the battle. They worked together, their hands moving in the same rhythms, their silence comfortable. The ghosts of their husbands stood between them, not as a barrier, but as a bond. One summer, the soldiers came again. They were not a war party. They were a handful of men, led by a young, tired officer, and they carried a white flag. Gray Owl met them on the plains, a dozen warriors at his back. He brought Eleanor. The young officer stared at her. He could not understand what he was seeing. A white woman, dressed in fine, beaded buckskin, her hair in 2 long braids, standing beside the chief. "Ma'am," he said, his voice hesitant, "my name is Lieutenant Harris. We are here to offer peace. We are escorting you and these people, to the reservation at Fort Sill, for your own safety." Eleanor looked at him. He was a boy, younger than she was. He had kind, tired eyes. He was part of the world that had killed her. She spoke in perfect English. Her voice was steady, but it held a resonance, a power that made the officer blink. "Lieutenant," she said, "you come to offer us a cage. You call it safety. You offer us government beef. You call it provision. We are not hungry. We are not in danger. We are free." "But ma'am," he stammered, "you are a white woman. You must be. You must be rescued." Eleanor smiled. It was a slow, sad, knowing smile. It was a smile that held the memory of Conti's last, bloody grin. "Who," she asked, "will rescue me from you?" She looked at his men. She saw their faces, hard, cruel, indifferent. She remembered the man in the canyon, the one who had called her a prize. "I am Tawonibi of the Numunu," she said. "I am not Eleanor Vance. That girl died in a fire many years ago. She was killed by your people. Or perhaps she was killed by mine. It does not matter. She is gone." She turned to Gray Owl and spoke in Comanche. "He says they have a small, square place for us, with bad meat. He says it is safe." Gray Owl spat on the ground. Eleanor turned back to the lieutenant. "The chief, Gray Owl, thanks you for your offer. He says that the Llano Estacado is our home. We will not leave it. You may leave. Go in peace, but do not return. The next time, we will not speak." The officer was stunned. He was defeated. He saw in her eyes a will that was older and stronger than his orders, stronger than his army. He saw a woman who was truly, terrifyingly free. He tipped his hat, his face full of confusion. and he led his men away. Eleanor watched them go, a small, receding cloud of dust. She had not needed a rifle. She had used Conti's weapon, his words, his mind. She had protected his people. She walked back to the camp. Masi's son, now a tall young man of 14, ran to her. He called her Pia, mother. She put her arm around his shoulders. That night, she sat by her fire, alone. She was not lonely. She looked up at the vast, star-filled sky, the same sky Conti was under. She had lost the man she loved, but she had found his life. She had found his purpose, his people, and his peace. She had taken his split heart and made it her own, a bridge between two worlds. She had helped this small, broken band of survivors build a future, not a brighter future in the white man's terms, but a real one, a future where they were not defined by their losses or by the world's discrimination, but by their own unbreakable iron will. She was a woman, she was a healer, she was a memory, she was Comanche, and she was free. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to know where in the world you are listening from, so please leave a comment below to connect with us and share your thoughts. Be sure to subscribe to my channel, Wild West Tales, and like this video. It would also mean the world to us if you hit that hype button to help this story be heard by more people.